going to hand over now to Mrs. Roberts, who will lead the panel, and enjoy.
Good morning or afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, whatever it is. It's good to see you. We're doing this in the question time manner. Put your hand up if you've ever watched question time. Okay, so between the 3 and a half of people. So you'll know what happens. In a moment, I'll ask the panel to introduce themselves. I'll then call upon someone whose name is attached to a question on this piece of paper I've just been given to ask their question. I'll get the panel to answer, and I'm going to be very fierce this time. I've been far too kind to them for the last 3 quarters of an hour. Then, with a bit of luck, we'll get time for 1 or 2 people to make a comment or ask a question from the floor. Then we'll go back to the questioner to see if the question has been answered. And we've got 45 minutes, so we'll start straight away. Panel, do introduce yourselves. Alex.
Thank you, Mrs. Roberts. I'm Alex Grant. I'm a Labour councillor for Blackheath Westcombe Ward in the Royal Borough of Greenwich, which is the area just to the north of the school.
I'm Chris Moody. I'm vicar of St Alfred's, which is in the centre of West Greenwich, and I've lived and worked in London all my life.
Okay.
I'm Rakaya, and I'm Year 13 representative, and I was formerly an external student.
Now you're intern. Steve.
Hello, I'm Steve Curtis. I'm a partner in the international law firm Chance, working in Canary Wharf, specialising in banking and finance.
I'm Clive Efford, Member of Parliament for Eltham, which covers sort of Plumstead and the whole of the Eltham area. I'm also the shadow spokesperson for sport and tourism.
I'm Munira Mohammed, currently intervention tutor in Thomas Tallis, also a youth worker, former campaigner in Occupy and other sort of stop and search campaigns, and I'm also studying a master's.
Thank you very much. A warm round of applause for our panel. I think we're going to start with a question about voting. 12SY, do we have Paulina and her questions? Where are we? Thank you.
Why should people vote if they don't feel represented by any of the parties?
Why should people vote if they don't feel represented by any parties? Clive, you must start.
Well, I don't think I don't support compulsory voting, so that's your freedom to choose. If you don't think that any of the parties represent your view, then the only way you can express that is to abstain. I would suggest you spoil your ballot paper, because spoiled ballot papers do get counted. And so if there were a number of people turning up at a polling station and spoiling their ballot paper, I think that would be noted as an objection. I think that the people's concern about politics is that many of the issues force the parties together, and people struggle to find out the difference between the main parties and just exactly what they stand for. And I think it's important, that I don't want to kick off a political debate here because we don't have a representative of the Liberal Democrats or the Conservatives. But, it is important that we clearly set out our, philosophical and policy positions and where we differ, but do so in a way that people really understand rather than get switched off by.
Thank you. Rakaya.
Once again, I agree. I don't think that voting should be compulsory, and I do agree with you that you should be able to. It would be better if you went in and spoke your ballot paper rather than just staying at home. Because if you can stay at home, it could just be a case where people just think you're not bothered, and so the people that do go in and vote for a particular party unnecessarily, for example, win the election when really and truly it's not representative. So I would go in and spoil my ballot paper.
Thank you. We might have to have a conversation later on about what spoiling the ballot paper means and what that does to the democratic process. But before that, let's see.
I also agree. I don't think you should have to vote if you don't want to vote. If you feel not represented, then I think, and it's important to you, it's incumbent upon you to make that known and to influence and to inform the debate. Because obviously it's important that our political parties are representative of the views of this country.
Thank you. Chris?
I don't believe in compulsory voting either. I think if you don't feel that your views are represented by any of the major parties, that you should get involved either in a single issue or in a local issue as a way of continuing to inform and refine your own political opinions. And you may find that through that, you actually in the end become a member of a political party.
Alex?
Yeah, I actually do support compulsory voting, but compulsory voting does not force anyone to vote for a political party they don't want to support, because as has been explained earlier, you can support your ballot paper or write none of the above, or you perhaps even something ruder than that on the ballot paper. We need to bear in mind that millions of people through history have actually fought and in many cases died for the right to vote. There are lots of people around the world who don't live in a democratic society who give their hind teeth to live in the UK, where they do have the power to elect and get rid of their government. And let's be clear, there are some clear differences. I'm only going to give a couple because of time, but there are some very clear differences between the Labour Party and the Conservative Lib Dem coalition we have at the moment. The Conservatives have increased tuition fees from £3,000 to £9,000. They've taken away education support allowance. They've suggested that young people under the age of 25 should not be able to claim housing benefits. These are things that the Labour Party oppose. So let's not, I'm not saying that the Labour Party is perfect or our political system is perfect, but let's not pretend that all political parties and all politicians are the same. There are some very clear differences, and that's why it's important to turn out and vote.
Thank you very much. And finally, Neil.
Yeah. I don't think that it should be compulsory for you to vote, but I do think that it's important that you find other spaces to be heard or other spaces to express your political views. Now, I think in the last 10 years there has been a rise in kind of new social movements and a kind of ways of engaging in what's essentially identity politics. So I think there are spaces where you can be heard, but I think it's very important at the same time that those are sort of taken on board as well by mainstream political parties, because what that suggests then is that there might be a group of people that don't want to vote or engage with traditional politics, but actually are sending very clear messages about what their priorities are and what they want to see the government do.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a comment from the floor? Who would like to say something about whether it should be compulsory to vote or not? Anyone have a view on this? Gent in the front row.
Hi. I don't think it should be compulsory to vote, mainly because lots of people don't have a political opinion. I do think that if you do have a political opinion, specifically if you don't agree with any party, you should definitely go there to vote and, like, to spoil your ballot paper, because that is essentially ticking 90 above. Whereas if you don't have an opinion and forcing people to vote who don't have an opinion, they may just randomly select a party which is potentially against their views.
Okay, good point. And another person on the front row.
If it was compulsory to vote, wouldn't people actually go out their way to find out what the Labour's actually want, what the party is actually giving? There's some people, when they don't have a political view, they don't tend to find out what the government's doing for them. So if it was made compulsory voting, then wouldn't people be more into politics and actually get involved in it?
So your argument is that making voting compulsory might improve
Political
improve the political system. What do you think about that?
No, I don't think it would. I think it just follows that because someone's got to vote that they'll be bothered to find out more. I do think there's a responsibility with voting. I'm told all the time, we can't see any difference, what's the point, you're all the same, and all that. And when people are dissatisfied, I do think that there's a challenge for them too. You can't just say, oh, I don't like politicians, or I don't like the issues that they talk about, without actually going out your way to try and inform the politicians what you're thinking. Because actually, believe it or not, we are desperate to find out what people think. And politicians of all political persuasions are interested in what their constituents are talking about. It's our food and drink, it's what we thrive on. And I just wish that those people who are dissatisfied would communicate more and express their views more. So that we can enter into that dialogue. But sadly, I think too many people have become apathetic and things don't change fast enough. The whole process is very frustrating because you make a decision today and it'll be quite some time down the road before that decision actually makes a difference to someone. And then they start to question, why is that happening to? And so you know, people need to engage, do need to engage more. But those people who are dissatisfied need to express their views more too.
Thank you. I'm actually going to move on from this. Paulina, have your question been answered? You can say no, it hasn't. At some point. Okay. Let's move on. I want to go on to one of the questions about religious expression, and I'm very interested by the question which has been put to us from Kat. Is Kat here? Where is she? Excellent. Speak up from back there, Kat, please.
Why shouldn't all of us be able to represent our identity without having to comply with society's norms? Whether this relates to wearing religious symbols, home hair, piercings, tattoos, etc. Does the panel agree that allowing expression of identity or applying restrictions should apply to everyone?
This is a very interesting question. Does the panel agree that applying restrictions or allowing expression of identity should apply to all, no matter whether what you want to wear is religious or political or whatever? Rakaya, you're a young person. Let's start with you.
Okay, first of all, I'm a young person who actually likes piercing myself. And so in that sense, I don't think, the thing about restriction is that restriction it's important. And we can't pretend it isn't. So in relation to the niqab and the veil and whatnot, I can understand the concerns with that because of the fact that when it comes to security and practicality, also like just being in class and, for example, seeing someone's facial expression, you don't know what, for example, they're going through, or not being able to communicate, wow, that's just in relation to the niqab. But generally, what you said about restriction, I don't think that there should be restriction with self-expression because we're living in a democracy and individualisation is key.
Individual freedom is key. Interesting. Alex?
Yeah, if people make a free choice, an educated choice to pierce parts of their bodies or to wear a religious symbol or to wear a form of religious dress, that's fine. However, I do think we need to make sure it is a free choice. I'm opposed, as I'm sure everyone else is here in this room, to female genital mutilation, which is forcing a change on someone else's body rather than changing our own body voluntarily. I'm also concerned about the idea that people who are working in or interacting with the public services should wear a full facial veil because, as you said earlier, Rakaya, for reasons of communication and identification, I think it's important that on occasions like that, people's faces are visible.
Okay, thank you. Clive?
I agree with everything that's been said, but I think you also included political symbols as well. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah? Well,
I did.
you did?
Yeah.
All right, okay. Freedom of expression, absolutely in favour of that. And if that involves religious symbols, absolutely. And the issue about the niqab and being able to communicate with people, I don't think it's appropriate in certain situations where people interact. But if we're talking about political symbols, there are a number of political symbols that I would have a great deal of difficulty with. I wouldn't want to see anyone in this room something displaying BNP or English Defence League or a swastika or anything like that, which expresses a view which is about being against somebody else's freedoms or liberties. And so I think there are times where it's appropriate to have a restriction on that because it's not appropriate for people to display something that sets them out against somebody else's freedom. So I think there are limitations, and it's a very interesting discussion around those sensibilities and the need to be able to express yourself freely, but at the same time not be able to do it in a way that intimidates or threatens another person's freedom. That's a very important area of debate. It's very important that we keep that balance right, because otherwise we open the door to those people who would actually take away those very freedoms that we all hold dear.
Thank you very much, Munira.
Yeah, I think I just want to start off by clarifying actually that there's a difference between the hijab and the niqab. So the niqab is what covers you completely, and the hijab is what just kind of covers as a veil, so you can still see the face. So I think that it's important to distinguish between those two before sort of deciding which one, whether or not that veil is appropriate. I do think, however, that in a time which in the media can be quite Islamophobic, that I think it's important to not necessarily assume that just because you don't wear a niqab, you're going to communicate effectively as well. And it doesn't necessarily. I know that it provides perhaps more opportunity for it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get someone that affects that can show their facial expressions, or that from which you can sort of fully kind of read as well. I think that it's very important that you still have freedom of choice, so that again extends to freedom to express beyond religious symbols. But then I think people also have to then understand that sometimes that there can be stereotypes of sort of impressions that are attached to that. So yes, you have the freedom of choice, but then just also be conscious of perhaps the kind of appropriateness of that context. Again, if you're going into something formal, again, you might be judged against that. And then again, just lastly, to kind of agree, I think, with some of the political symbols. I think yes, if you're advocating something, that kind of reinforces hatred, let's say, for some groups, then I think that's very important. Actually, that it's not necessarily something that's advocated against, because it does take away from other people's freedoms and their right to not feel intimidated and threatened as well, which is really important in a democratic society. So yeah, those are the three.
Thank you, Munira. Steve?
Well, I think I'm with the panel on much of this. Freedom of expression is important, but with freedom comes respect, and also one has to consider obviously how it impacts the greater good of society. And I think there are laws which regulate freedom of expression, and generally speaking, the balance is probably about right. There are laws against incitement to racial hatred, for instance, and so I don't think with freedom comes the ability to prevail in all circumstances. I think there's a balance to be struck, and I think generally speaking we probably get it about right.
Thank you, Chris. I'm going to come to you last, and what I'd like you also to address is whether or not there's a material difference between people having tattoos or piercings and religious symbolism.
I think there is a material difference between the two. One is an expression of individual national identity. The other is a proclamation that in some sense you are allied to a faith group. And I think that there is a difference in respect that should be given to those different things. I am concerned, like everybody here, about aggressive identities, and therefore if there is something that I express in my personal identity which is threatening to another person, there should be some limit on that, but the question is who decides whether it's intimidating or not, and that's what the difficulty is often about. So for some people, it might just me carrying a floppy Bible under my arm might be regarded as being intimidating. But I don't think I should be denied my, to carry it.
Your floppy Bible.
My floppy Bible.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone want to make a comment from the floor on this? It's lady in the middle.
I think that the media has shown the face has like sign impression. Well, I don't think that is the case in many people wear it. I think that's part of the problem in the debate, that it's not being presented in the way that people can actually wear it to be sort of used as.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I just think that the simplest thing would be to say if there's a banned political or criminal organisation, you shouldn't be free
To wear their
insignia.
Just a minute, and we'll have one from you. Anybody else want to speak from the floor? I haven't spoken before, so hold your case, please. In which case we will move on after just asking Kat whether or not she feels that her question has been sufficiently answered. Was that sorry?
Yeah.
Yes, oh good, excellent, well done. Thank you. Right, moving on to education, please. Two questions from 12PH I quite like the look of. And with a bit of look, I would like us to be able to give question one a bit of time for Griff, and then a quick whip round, Alexandra's question at the end of that. So Griff, where are you?
What are the panel's thoughts on placing a strong emphasis on exams and their outcome when there's a noticeable proportion of people who find exams as a whole difficult and in some cases meaningless?
Okay, where shall we start? Alex, please.
Yeah, I don't think exams are meaningless. I think it's important that when you finish secondary education, you should have a record of your performance and what you're good at, but also what you're less good at, to show to prospective employers or universities. Having said that, I do think too much emphasis is placed on exam results on their own, on the inspections of Ofsted, which sometimes don't accurately record the strengths and weaknesses of individual schools, and on league tables. And the concern that I have, and I know Clive shares this, about the current government's policies, is they seem to be attacking any school that isn't an academy or a free school. They seem to be attacking the professionalism of teachers, even allowing some of these new free schools to employ staff who aren't qualified as teachers. And they've also taken millions and millions of pounds out of the school building programme towards funding new schools. This school was very lucky. It was rebuilt under a Labour government. It opened in 2011. There are other schools across the country that were less lucky and needed new school buildings and haven't got them because of this government's education policies. But I do think Michael Gove is not 100% wrong. I think he is right to say that it is important that young people who emerge from school have got basic standards of literacy and numeracy.
Thank you. Steve.
Well, I mean, obviously a well-rounded education is important. It's not all about exams, but as an employer of people coming out of university, really the first thing that we tend to select from are exam results. But that doesn't clearly tell the whole story, because everyone sort of at the high achieving end will tend to have exactly the same results. So ultimately it's going to come down to what else is going to distinguish you from simply your exam results. And I walked around the school earlier today, and the facilities are absolutely first rate, and the opportunities to interview to have a well-rounded education beyond simply just fulfilling exam requirements is huge. And I think to have that opportunity, you obviously are very lucky. So I agree that I think I came from a school where everything was on exams. We didn't have any sort of assessments, coursework. It was all how you did on the day. And some people thrive on that. Perhaps I was one of them, and others don't. And you recognise that there must be opportunities for those that don't. And I think providing a well-rounded education, having the right teaching is ultimately what's important.
Thank you. Manira.
I do think that exams are important as a kind of baseline standard to measure on, but I don't necessarily think that solely focusing on exams is going to be representative of all students' abilities. I remember when I myself came to Thomas Telescope, there was a lot more kind of coursework in English that's now turned into controlled assessment, and I've kind of recognised actually going into the workplace a lot of the skills that you kind of learn from coursework and kind of homegrown research and so on actually is kind of very transferable into the workplace as well. So I don't necessarily think that this kind of emphasis on exam conditions necessarily translates so much into the world of work. And finally, I also think that it's going to become increasingly difficult to to support all students that are in need in exams with a lot of the kind of proposed recommendations in terms of removing key stage 3 levels as well, to be able to firstly measure students' progress as they go on, and I think it's very dangerous actually in the sense that it could be setting some schools up for failure without having that kind of continuous monitoring in place. So.
Thank you. Rakaya, what do you think?
Yeah, as a student myself, well, sorry to sound quite harsh, me personally, I find that exams they're necessary in the same way in which you take a driving examination to make sure that you're safe on the road. It's like we're living in a society where we're all, I don't know, this sounds horrible, but it's like, it is a competition at the end of the day. If I'm at an interview and I'm next to someone who has lower exam results than me, that's going to be the way to distinguish who gets the job. It is also, but then again, there needs to be emphasis placed on this being a well-rounded individual, and that's why some of the reforms that Michael Gove is making, it really takes away the importance of creativity and also that enjoying education, because it should not just be, I'll go to school, I get my exam results and then I leave. That's depressing. Why go to school to begin with? They need to place emphasis on creativity, also community, communal relationships, so on and so forth.
Thank you. Chris?
I agree with the fact that there does have that you do have to have exams. It's a way of measuring progress. I think measuring progress is important, and I think everybody needs to get to a basic level of numeracy and literacy. What I am more concerned about is the fact that there's such an emphasis on core subjects and targeting certain subjects. I think it should be much broader in terms of what is regarded as being a proper subject. And I think that it should be thought of in terms of the portfolio that somebody brings with them as they go through life. And you don't stop being educated when you leave school or university. And equally, when people are making distinctions between people, they're looking as much for social skills and communication as they are for achievement. Academic achievement in that sense. And to neglect that is actually disadvantaging people for the workplace. So the education does need to be broad in order to support people in life.
Thank you, Chris and Clive.
I think we've got to get back to what is it we want to measure through exams. What are we after? What we want to know is how much you've learned and what your abilities are, having learned that stuff. And to suggest that somehow comes down to one day where how you perform in an exam, I think it's just mad. I mean, I just don't think. There is a place for exams, of course. You can't do away with them entirely. But to just gamble everything on that performance on that day is wrong. You do 2 years for A-levels and you study several units modules throughout that 2 year period. And I don't see anything wrong with you being assessed on what you've achieved during that process. And if people are not satisfied with that, if it's an unsatisfactory process, then let's improve the monitoring and assessment as it goes through. But the idea that you have to have all that knowledge right at the end and do your A-levels, because that will work for some people, and others it won't. And I'm an employer. I employ people in my office who work for me. And it certainly wouldn't be the basis of how I would employ someone, because the skills that you learn by doing your research and you writing up is exactly the sort of skill that you have to have in my office. If you were researching a particular topic, or if you were looking into an issue that had been raised by one of my constituents. So it's that I would have to assess, and just an exam system doesn't really prepare you for the sorts of work that I need. So yes, there are places for exams, but I think what we need to do is really assess your progress, what you've achieved at each stage through your education.
Put your hand up, ladies and gents, if you are generally speaking either in favour or against exams. Put your hand up if you're generally speaking in favour of exams. On this side of the room, how very odd. Lovely, a couple of people over there, thank you. If you're generally against exams. It's not very evenly split, that, isn't it?
No, we won easy.
Griff, would you like to come back? I can't see you. Where are you? Oh, there you are. Sorry. Would you want to make a comment if your question been answered?
Just a final point. I do support exams as an idea. I just think they're placing too much emphasis on them as sort of the final result, the be all and end all.
Isn't that why we have courses that are like 50% examination, 50% project? It's supposed to support both.
Well, it is, but your turn to speak has gone. Yeah?
But subjects that do courses are not valued as much as subjects that are like exams. So for instance, if you're going to do science, it's all based on exams, and that's what people think that are more superior than things that you study as a course and project wise.
Okay. Let's have one more show of hands before I move on to the second half of this. Put your hand up if you've ever taken a retake, done a resit of anything. Lovely. Hands down. Put your hand up if you've never taken a resit of anything. Okay, interesting. Thank you. Okay, Alexandra, where are you with your question?
With the emphasis on having only one chance at exams, so the company they'll be in the role they are in now, if they fail any of their exams, will that be an opportunity?
Can I just repeat that because Alexandra's got a quiet voice? With the emphasis on only one chance in exams, do the panel believe that they will be in the role they are now if they failed any of their exams without the opportunity of retaking them? Okay, who would like to start on this? Go on, Steve, start on this.
I certainly wouldn't be in the role I have today if I hadn't had the chance to retake. But it's not that. Actually, to be honest, I wouldn't be in the role that I am today with the grades I got, actually. There you go. But I think for reasons that Clive was saying, I mean, if you can have a bad day, I mean, it's crazy that the opportunity simply passes you by if you're not able to reset them just because you've had a bad day, and all sorts of reasons why that might be the case. So I'm absolutely would be in favour of continuing that. In fact, I'm sorry, I hadn't appreciated that was now being denied your students.
Yes, well,
I would be honest.
Okay. Go on, Clive.
I don't know, as a student, I don't really understand why Michael Gove wants us to be superhuman, because we can't just take in all this information and then all of a sudden on a day, you have to also take into consideration that we're doing multiple subjects. He thinks we're not doing enough, and yet he doesn't want us to be able to have a chance to retake if something goes wrong. And I think that's a bit ridiculous.
Okay. Chris, what do you think?
I would still be in the same role that I am now, because actually the academic standards aren't that high. No, I think people should be able to resit. I think, part of it is a matter of confidence, and not everybody is equally confident. So people need to learn confidence, and that comes, so you give them a second chance.
No, I don't think I would be actually, because I came in year 10 actually from Denmark, so I was completely unprepared for the examination system. But given, I think it was my courseware actually I was supposed to do, and given that extra, it was just a 1.5 year actually to familiarise myself with, the way that it was being assessed, I then came up with like an A and an 8B, so I think it's really important that you're given the opportunity to learn from your mistakes and also have a positive learning experience, so you don't just associate learning with lots of cramming in that with the pressure for that one day, because learning is something that you're going to be doing throughout your whole life, and you want to have a positive experience with that so you can continue to learn from your mistakes. I think it's really important.
Okay.
I never went to university. My route into politics came through local authority and trade union activity. But it's something I do regret. But I got expelled from secondary school for organising a strike.
If we'd known that, I should have had you on the panel.
Yeah, I'm afraid I did, because it was the time of work to rule amongst teachers, and we were using school pupils to break the strike, so I organised the strike amongst the students. They got sent to an FE college. Anyhow, the toughest exam I've ever had in my life is being selected to be a member of Parliament. It is the most gruelling process, and had I failed that, of course, I wouldn't be here today. But you know, on the issue of resitting, I really do think it is important that people are given that opportunity to resit, because you know, education is so important, and we can't gamble it for one moment in someone's life. It just doesn't seem right to me. What we want to know is, you know, what have you learned? What are your abilities? Not whether you're a bit out of sorts on a day, or you know, misunderstood a question or whatever. I mean, my daughter's in her exam completely misunderstood one of the questions, a history question, and answered a similar subject but slightly off the cue. So you know, cost her a grade in her final degree. You know.
I'm going to have to stop you there, Alex.
I believe in second chances. When I was at university almost 20 years ago, I failed an exam at the end of my first year. I retook it a few months later, managed to pass, and in the end got a reasonably good degree. And I think the same rule should apply to other people. I think everyone deserves to have an education that goes on all their life if they want. And if you fail an exam, you should be allowed to retake it. Full stop.
And just in case you're interested, I would be in the position that I'm in now, because I didn't take any resits because they weren't around at the time. I was educated at a time when 20% of people went to university, if that, and the offers were, as Steve had said, low compared to modern offers. So life was a bit different then, and it may be that Mr. Gold wants to turn back the clock in several different ways. Alexander, do you think that your question was answered reasonably? Would anyone like to make a final comment from the floor? Anyone willing to say something on this or on any other issue that we've discussed that you haven't had a chance to make a comment on? Go on.
Sorry, back to the religious symbols. You said that lots of religious symbols should be banned, such as the swastika, but many symbols mean different things to different people. For example, the swastika of Buddhism, I think, is a representation of Dharma, the absolute truth of all things. And additionally, the 666 in Christianity, there is a sect of Christianity which believes it's the number of the Sega, which last year in America there was quite some controversy over a lot of them having that tattooed on their wrist. So I do think we need to really look into the reasons why people are having these symbols put on themselves or shown by themselves, as opposed to what they're trying to represent, as opposed to what people are assuming they're representing.
Thank you. I'm going to stop you there because that was a final plea for individual freedom, which seems like a very good place to end. Can I ask you to show your appreciation to the members of our panel? I would like to add my personal round of applause to you for your cooperation and participation with this, and to Mrs. Ord and Mr. Tomlin for their organisation.